The hook. The Klieg lights blazed down on Soundstage 7 like an interrogation room Ray remembered from another life. Fake smoke drifted through the air, and the metallic tang of stage blood mixed with the industrial cleaner still dripping from his abandoned mop bucket 20 feet away. Ray's hand moved instinctively toward his hip, muscle memory from decades past, but found only the plastic radio clipped to his janitor's belt. His Glock was locked in a safety deposit box across town, untouched for 15 years, just like everything else from his old life. Viktor Petrov stood 30 yards away, barking instructions at two stuntmen in Russian-accented English. The man had aged well, silver threading through dark hair, the same predatory grace that had made him legend among Spetsnaz operatives. But Ray would know those pale green eyes anywhere. Eyes that had watched Agent Martinez bleed out in a Prague alley while Ray's backup never came. Chuck Norris stepped into Ray's peripheral vision, and the action star's gaze cut through the staged chaos with surgical precision. No confusion, no casual Hollywood curiosity about why a janitor had wandered onto a hot set, just the flat, calculating stare of a man who recognized exactly what he was looking at. A hunter who'd found unexpected prey. "Cut!" Petrov's voice sliced through the controlled mayhem. "Reset positions. Walker, your timing on the knife draw is still 2 beats slow." The crew scattered into practiced motion, grips adjusting lights, script supervisors checking continuity, extras filing toward craft services. But Ray caught the micro-signal that passed between Norris and his leading man, a slight nod that sent the actor drifting toward the far exit. Professional paranoia, refined by years of survival, screamed at Ray to run, grab his bucket, apologize for the interruption, disappear back into the invisible army of maintenance workers who kept Hollywood's dreams functioning. Sarah was safe in her suburban bubble in Pasadena, teaching 3rd grade and raising 2 kids who didn't even know Grandpa Ray existed. That safety depended on his continued anonymity. But 15 years of guilt had weight. 3 good agents, Martinez, Chen, and Davidson, had died because Ray hesitated, because he'd been made in Prague and couldn't complete his mission, because Viktor Petrov had vanished into the intelligence underworld like smoke, leaving only bodies and classified failure reports. Ray's feet moved before his brain caught up, not toward the exit, toward the craft services table, where a janitor might reasonably go to empty trash bins and wipe down surfaces. Petrov was coaching the stunt team through a complex fight sequence, his accent barely detectable after decades in America. "Remember, gentlemen, violence must appear spontaneous while remaining absolutely controlled. Like ballet, yes. Beautiful death." The words hit Ray like ice water. Petrov had used that exact phrase in Prague moments before Martinez died. Beautiful death. The signature of a man who found artistry in assassination. Ray busied himself replacing trash can liners while his trained ear cataloged details. Petrov wore a Rolex Submariner, standard KGB issue from the late 70s. His stance favored his left leg, suggesting an old injury to his right knee. And when he gestured, a thin scar ran along his forearm where Ray's knife had found its mark during their rooftop encounter in Prague. No question. Viktor Petrov, the Soviet Union's most creative killer, was alive and training Hollywood's next generation of action heroes. But why? The Cold War had officially ended, but Ray knew better than most that wars between intelligence agencies never truly died. They just went underground, evolved, adapted. Excuse me. Ray's blood pressure spiked. Chuck Norris had materialized beside the craft services table with the quiet footsteps of a man who'd learned to move without sound. Up close, the action star's presence was even more unsettling. Not the manufactured charisma of Hollywood, but the controlled intensity Ray recognized from special operations veterans. "You're not supposed to be on this set." Norris's voice carried the flat authority of command. "Union regulations. Sorry, Mr. Norris. Just emptying trash. I'll be out of your way in—" "What's your name?" The question landed with sniper precision. Not casual celebrity small talk. An interrogation technique designed to force immediate response without thinking. "Ray." Ray Kowalski. Something flickered behind Norris's eyes. Recognition? Or just the natural suspicion of a man who'd learned that survival meant trusting no one? Kowalski, Norris repeated, as if testing the name's weight. How long have you worked here, Ray? 15 years, sir. And in those 15 years, you've never walked onto an active set during filming. It wasn't a question. Ray felt his cover story crumbling like wet tissue paper. Chuck Norris had done his homework. The legendary action star knew exactly who belonged on his set and who didn't, which meant Chuck Norris was far more than just another Hollywood tough guy with good publicity. The sound of approaching footsteps made both men turn. Viktor Petrov was walking toward them, and his pale green eyes had locked onto Ray's face with the focused intensity of a predator recognizing long-lost prey. 15 years of hiding were about to end in the next 60 seconds, and Ray realized he might not be the only one who'd been living a lie. Tomorrow's chapter reveals the deadly game that's been playing out in Hollywood's shadows for decades, and why Chuck Norris has been the perfect cover for the most dangerous hunt in espionage history. Hit that subscribe button, because you won't want to miss what happens when these three deadly professionals finally stop pretending to be something they're not. Time crystallized into fragments. Ray's peripheral vision cataloged escape routes, while his conscious mind wrestled with a reality 15 years in the making. The soundstage's exit signs glowed like distant lighthouses, but his legs felt welded to the polished concrete floor. Petrov's approach carried the unhurried confidence of a chess master moving toward checkmate. 20 yards, 15, each step deliberate, purposeful, while stagehands continued their choreographed reset around them, oblivious to the deadly reunion unfolding in their midst. Ray's fingers found the small photograph tucked behind his janitor's ID badge, a glimpse of Sarah and her kids at last summer's school carnival. Emma, age 7, chocolate ice cream smeared across her gap-toothed grin. Tommy, 5, clutching a stuffed elephant won at the ring toss. Sarah's arm wrapped protectively around both children, her smile genuine and unguarded in a way Ray barely remembered from her childhood. They didn't know he existed. Safer that way, he'd told himself for 15 years. Clean break. No grandfather to complicate their suburban peace with the ghosts of Prague and the bodies that haunted his sleep. Sarah believed he'd died in a car accident when she was 12, a lie her mother had constructed to explain his sudden disappearance into witness protection. But God, how he missed them. Problem, gentlemen? Petrov's voice carried traces of Moscow beneath the Hollywood polish. Up close, Ray could see the surgical precision of expensive dental work. The KGB had always taken care of their best assets. Chuck Norris stepped slightly forward, a movement so subtle it might have been coincidence. Except Ray recognized tactical positioning when he saw it. Norris was creating angles, controlling the conversation's geometry with the instincts of someone who understood that violence could erupt from casual words. Just discussing union protocols, Norris said smoothly. Our friend Ray here seems to have wandered off his usual route. Petrov's pale eyes never left Ray's face. Ray Kowalski. The name rolled off his tongue like a wine he was savoring. Polish heritage, yes? I have always admired Polish resilience, so difficult to break even under the most creative pressure. Ray forced himself to breathe normally, in through the nose, out through the mouth, while his nervous system screamed contradictory commands. Run, fight, disappear, protect what matters most. Just trying to do my job, sir. Keep the place clean. 15 years of cleaning. Petrov smiled, and Ray remembered that expression from Prague, moments before Martinez started screaming. Most admirable, such patience, such dedication to remaining invisible. The craft services table groaned under the weight of catered lunch, sandwiches growing stale under warming lights, coffee turning bitter in industrial urns. Normal sounds of a normal day, while three killers pretended to make small talk 20 feet from a catering crew discussing weekend plans. Ray's radio crackled. Ray, you copy? Got a cleanup needed in Soundstage 3, some kind of prop malfunction. The voice belonged to Miguel Santos, night supervisor and the closest thing Ray had to a friend. Decent man, hard-working, sent half his paycheck home to family in Guadalajara. Miguel knew Ray as the quiet janitor who worked double shifts and never complained, who helped train new hires and remembered everyone's birthday. Miguel had no idea he was radioing a man who'd once eliminated 7 targets in a single night across 3 European capitals. Copy, Miguel. On my way. Ray's voice stayed steady while his mind calculated tactical options. Soundstage 3 was across the lot, past security checkpoints and through areas where dozens of witnesses made violence impractical. Petrov's head tilted slightly. Duty calls, yes? But perhaps we might continue our conversation later. I find myself nostalgic for stories of the old country. Polish history fascinates me, particularly the Warsaw Ghetto. Such creativity and survival methods. Warsaw Ghetto. Ray's blood turned to Arctic water. That had been his operational codename in Prague, intelligence agency's sick humor, naming a Polish-American operative after history's most desperate last stand. Petrov knew exactly who he was. Chuck Norris cleared his throat. Victor, we need to review the afternoon sequence before the crew returns from lunch. Of course. Petrov's smile widened. Until later, Pan Kowalski. I look forward to learning more about your janitorial techniques. Ray grabbed his supply cart with hands that wanted to shake but couldn't afford the luxury. Professional discipline, drilled into muscle memory through years of training, kept his movements casual, while his mind ran probability calculations. Petrov would wait until after filming wrapped. Soundstage 7 would empty of witnesses around 7 p.m. Dark parking lot, industrial district, perfect isolation for the kind of creative violence that had made Viktor Petrov legend among Soviet wet work specialists, which gave Ray approximately 6 hours to decide whether to run or fight. 6 hours to choose between the safety he'd built for Sarah's family and the justice Martinez, Chen, and Davidson would never see. The photograph behind his badge seemed to burn against his chest as he pushed the cart toward Soundstage 3, feeling pale green eyes track his movement like a sniper's scope. 15 years of peace were ending, and Ray had no idea which man he wanted to be when the killing started. Inciting incident. Ray's hands moved through the motions of cleaning, while his mind raced through contingency plans he'd hoped never to use again. Soundstage 3 buzzed with the controlled chaos of a romantic comedy. Bright lights, laughing extras, the kind of mindless Hollywood confection that had become his refuge from darker realities. But even scrubbing fake coffee stains from craft services tables couldn't silence the echo of Petrov's voice, Pan Kowalski. The formal Polish address had been deliberate mockery, a reminder of everything Ray had lost in Prague. His radio buzzed again. Miguel's voice, but wrong somehow. Tighter. Ray, change of plans. Need you in Building C, basement level. Some kind of water main issue. Building C had been condemned for 3 years. Everyone on the maintenance crew knew that. Miguel would never send anyone there, especially not for a non-existent plumbing problem. Ray's blood went cold, as understanding hit him like a sledgehammer. They had Miguel. Professional paranoia screamed warnings, but Ray was already moving. Miguel Santos, 52 years old, diabetic, grandfather of 6, had never hurt anyone in his life. His biggest crime was sneaking leftover catering food to homeless veterans camping behind the studio commissary. The basement of Building C smelled like mold and 30 years of Hollywood dreams gone wrong. Emergency lighting cast everything in sickly yellow, and Ray's footsteps echoed off concrete walls that had probably witnessed their share of buried scandals. Miguel sat zip-tied to a folding chair in what had once been a screening room. Blood trickled from his nose and his Paramount ID badge had been torn away, scattered on the floor like broken promises. But his eyes were alert, angry rather than afraid. "Didn't tell them nothing, Ray," Miguel said through swollen lips. "But they knew exactly where to find me." A figure stepped from the shadows behind Miguel's chair, and Ray's world tilted sideways. Agent Susan Chen. Alive. Older. Grayer. Wearing a tailored business suit instead of tactical gear, but unmistakably the woman who died screaming in Prague while Ray's backup never came. "Hello, Warsaw." Chen's voice carried 15 years of carefully cultivated rage. "You look good for a dead man." Ray's mind reeled through impossible calculations. Chen had been shot twice in the chest during the Prague extraction. Ray had watched her blood pool on cobblestones while Petrov disappeared into the night, had carried the guilt of her death like a tumor for 15 years. "You're supposed to be dead." "So are you." Chen circled Miguel's chair like a predator testing prey. Amazing what officially dying can do for one's career prospects. Agency cleaned up the Prague mess very efficiently. 3 agents killed in action, 1 deep cover operative burned and relocated. Nice, neat story. Miguel tried to speak, but Chen's hand pressed against his shoulder. Gentle pressure that probably felt like a mountain to a man zip-tied to a chair. Except Martinez really is dead, Chen continued. And so is Davidson. I watched them die, Ray. While you ran, I was blown. Petrov made me before I could complete the mission. Bullshit. Chen's composure cracked slightly. You hesitated. 3 seconds of conscience cost 3 lives, and you've been hiding behind a janitor's uniform ever since. Ray forced himself to focus past the emotional impact. Chen alive meant everything he'd believed about Prague was wrong, which meant someone had orchestrated 15 years of carefully constructed lies. Who burned us in Prague? Wrong question, Warsaw. Better question. Who's been protecting Viktor Petrov for 3 decades while he builds a private army in plain sight? Chen produced a manila envelope from her jacket, tossing it at Ray's feet. Photographs spilled across the concrete. Surveillance shots spanning years. Petrov training actors. Choreographing fight scenes. Teaching stunts that looked suspiciously like advanced combat techniques. But the final photograph made Ray's chest tighten like a vice. Chuck Norris shaking hands with a man in a dark suit, both standing beside a memorial wall. Ray recognized the location. CIA headquarters, Langley. The fallen agent memorial where Martinez's and Davidson's stars had been carved into black granite. 27 years, Chen said quietly. Chuck Norris has been CIA since 1979. Deep cover so classified it doesn't officially exist. His entire Hollywood career was built around getting close to Petrov. Ray stared at the photograph while his understanding of reality crumbled like rotted wood. Then why hasn't he eliminated Petrov? Chen's smile carried no warmth. Because Petrov was never the real target, Ray. He was bait. The agency needed someone to draw out the bigger fish, the network that's been selling American intelligence to the highest bidder for 4 decades. Miguel groaned softly, and Ray realized the older man was fighting to stay conscious. Diabetic shock, probably triggered by stress and whatever Chen had used to take him down. Let Miguel go. He's innocent. Nobody's innocent. Chen pulled a syringe from her jacket. Especially not you, Warsaw. Time to choose. Help us finish what Prague started, or watch everyone you care about disappear one by one. The syringe glinted under the emergency lights as Ray finally understood the true scope of his nightmare. 15 years of peace hadn't been refuge. They'd been preparation for the war that was just beginning. The syringe hung between them like a question mark made of glass and steel. Ray's muscles coiled with 15 years of suppressed training while his janitor's uniform felt like a costume that no longer fit. Sarah's safe, he said, testing Chen's knowledge. She doesn't know I exist. Chen's laugh carried the bitter edge of broken promises. Your daughter picked up Emma from soccer practice 43 minutes ago. Drove straight to Tommy's piano lesson on Maple Street. Same routine every Thursday. She tilted the syringe toward the emergency lighting. Amazing how vulnerable routines make people. Ray's vision narrowed to a tunnel focused on Chen's throat. Combat reflexes screamed to move, strike, eliminate the threat. But Miguel's labored breathing anchored him to reality. One wrong step and an innocent man died. What do you want? Petrov's building something inside Hollywood's action elite. Training camps disguised as stunt schools. Financial networks hidden behind production companies. 3 decades of patient infiltration, and we're finally close enough to map the entire operation. Chen moved around Miguel's chair again, her footsteps echoing off concrete like a countdown timer. But Petrov's paranoid. Won't expose the full network unless he feels genuinely threatened. We need bait he can't resist. You want me to surface. Make him think I'm hunting him. Not think, Warsaw. You are hunting him. Chen stopped directly behind Miguel, and Ray saw his friend's eyes widen with recognition of his own mortality. Because if you don't, people start dying. Starting with Miguel here, then moving up the food chain to more personal targets. Ray forced himself to think past the rage. Chen had resources, intelligence networks, the kind of operational support that came from major government backing. But she was also desperate. 15 years of deep cover work had the stench of obsession, not patriotism. Why now? What changed? Petrov's timeline accelerated. Something spooked him 3 weeks ago, and he's been liquidating assets ever since. 2 stunt coordinators died in accidents. A prop master in Vancouver vanished completely. Whatever he's planning, it's moving to operational phase. Miguel coughed, a wet sound that suggested internal bleeding. Chen had hit him harder than the visible injuries showed, and Ray realized his friend was running out of time for medical attention. Let me get Miguel to a hospital. Then we'll talk. We talk now. Chen raised the syringe. This contains enough insulin to drop his blood sugar into fatal range. Completely untraceable. Looks like diabetic shock brought on by stress. You have approximately 90 seconds to decide. Ray's mind cataloged the basement's tactical environment. 20 feet to Chen's position, concrete floor offering good traction, one obvious exit but probably others hidden behind the shadows. Chen was favoring her left side, old injury, maybe from Prague or something more recent. But she was also prepared for violence. The syringe wasn't her only weapon, just the most immediately lethal one, and Miguel was positioned perfectly to catch crossfire from any aggressive move. What's the operation? Tomorrow night. Chuck Norris is hosting a private screening for industry insiders. Petrov will be there, along with key figures from his network. We need someone to force his hand, make him reveal the full scope of his operation. Chen's smile turned predatory. Someone with the right motivation. Someone whose survival threatens everything Petrov's built. Someone like Warsaw. Ray understood the trap now. Chen wasn't recruiting him, she was weaponizing him. 15 years of guilt, rage, and carefully buried training pointed like a guided missile at Viktor Petrov's heart. And after I draw him out? After that, Warsaw, you finally get justice for Martinez and Davidson. And maybe, if you're very good, your granddaughter keeps believing her piano lessons are the most dangerous thing in her little world. The syringe caught the light again as Chen moved closer to Miguel's neck. Ray could see the insulin inside, clear as water and just as innocent looking. Miguel's eyes met his, tired, frightened, but somehow apologetic, as if he was sorry for dragging Ray back into a war he'd tried so hard to escape. Ray's hand moved to his belt, where a utility knife hung beside his keys. Old habits died hard, and even janitors needed cutting tools. The blade was only 3 inches long, but Ray had killed with less. Chen noticed the gesture and shook her head. Reflexes like that are why you survive Prague, Warsaw. But they're also why Miguel dies if you try anything heroic. In the distance, a security guard's radio crackled with routine chatter about shift changes and parking lot rounds. Normal sounds from a normal world where the biggest threat was industrial accidents and workplace theft. A world Ray had inhabited for 15 years, pretending to be someone safe. But safety had been an illusion. Chen had found him, which meant others could too. 12 hours, Chen said quietly. Meet me at Soundstage 7 tomorrow night. Come alone, come ready to finish what Prague started, or start collecting funeral clothes. The basement suddenly felt like a tomb. Middle development. Chen withdrew the syringe but kept it visible, a promise wrapped in medical precision. Smart choice, Warsaw. Now cut him loose. Ray's utility knife sliced through Miguel's restraints with movements that belonged to someone who'd done this before. His friend slumped forward, conscious but shaky, blood sugar crashing from stress and whatever cocktail of fear Chen had administered through proximity alone. Miguel needs glucose. Now. Vending machine upstairs still works. Chen's voice carried casual indifference to human suffering that made Ray's teeth ache. But first, you're going to listen to exactly how deep this goes. Ray helped Miguel to his feet, feeling the older man's weight settle against his shoulder. 15 years of shared coffee breaks and birthday celebrations, and Miguel still had no idea he was being supported by someone trained to kill with those same gentle hands. The Prague operation wasn't about eliminating Petrov, Chen continued, following them toward the basement stairs. It was about mapping his network. 3 years of surveillance, behavioral analysis, financial tracking. We knew every safe house, every contact, every financial pipeline he'd built across Eastern Europe. Miguel's breathing steadied slightly as they climbed, but Ray could feel tremors running through his friend's frame. Diabetic shock was unpredictable, Miguel needed medical attention within the hour, not CIA briefings in condemned basements. Then why did everything go to hell? Because someone warned him. Someone with access to classified operational details fed Petrov our entire Prague playbook 12 hours before execution. Chen's footsteps echoed behind them like gunshots. Martinez and Davidson died because we walked into a counter-ambush orchestrated by American intelligence. The abandoned lobby of Building C stretched before them, dominated by a reception desk that had once welcomed Hollywood's Golden Age elite. Now water stains mapped decades of neglect across walls lined with empty picture frames, ghosts of publicity shots and premiere photographs that had been auctioned off to pay demolition costs. Miguel fumbled for the vending machine with shaking hands, his Paramount ID badge long gone but muscle memory, guiding him toward the ancient Coca-Cola dispenser that maintenance crews had kept operational out of stubborn nostalgia. I got it. Ray fed quarters into the machine while Chen positioned herself near the exit, close enough to intervene, far enough to avoid appearing threatening. Professional kidnapper's distance. The Coke can felt ice cold against Ray's palm as he handed it to Miguel, watching his friend's color improve with each sugary swallow. Normal human kindness in an abnormal situation, and Ray realized how much he'd missed simple acts of caring for someone who mattered. Better? Ray asked. Miguel nodded, then looked directly at Chen. Lady, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but Ray's good people. 15 years working together, and he's never been anything but decent. Chen's expression shifted slightly, surprise at being addressed by someone she'd dismissed as collateral damage. Mr. Santos, your friend Ray has killed 17 people that we know about. Probably more we don't. The words hit Miguel like physical blows. Ray watched his friend's face cycle through disbelief, confusion, and finally a terrible kind of recognition as 15 years of small observations suddenly formed a larger picture. Why Ray never talked about his past. Why he volunteered for every dangerous cleaning job involving heights or confined spaces. Why his hands moved with unconscious precision when handling tools that could double as weapons. Jesus, Ray. Miguel's voice carried the weight of friendship cracking under revelations too large to process. Is she telling the truth? Ray met his friend's eyes and made a choice that felt like stepping off a cliff. Yeah, she is. The admission hung in the dusty air between them, while Miguel processed the death of every assumption he'd built about Ray Kowalski, night janitor, and the most reliable man on the maintenance crew. But that was a long time ago, Ray continued. Different life, different person. No, Chen's voice cut through the moment like surgical steel. Same person, Warsaw, just better at hiding. And now it's time to stop hiding and start remembering what you're actually good at. She produced a second manila envelope, this one thicker than the first. Petrov's current operation. 17 active sleeper agents positioned throughout Hollywood's action infrastructure. Stunt coordinators, weapons experts, fight choreographers. Each one trained to turn any film set into a tactical battlefield. Ray opened the envelope while Miguel finished his Coke in silence. The photographs inside showed faces he recognized. Professionals he'd seen around the studio for years. People whose work involved teaching actors how to fight convincingly for cameras. Except the training looked too real, too precise, too focused on actual lethality rather than cinematic spectacle. He's building an army, Ray said. Built. Past tense. Chen moved closer, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow felt more threatening than shouting. Tomorrow night's screening isn't just entertainment, Warsaw, it's graduation day. And if you don't help us stop it, your granddaughter's world becomes a very different place. Outside, normal Hollywood continued its daily business, while 3 people stood in an abandoned lobby, staring at photographs of a war most people would never know was being fought. Ray realized Miguel was studying him with new eyes, seeing past 15 years of careful camouflage to the killer underneath. The friendship was over. Everything safe was ending. And the worst part was knowing he'd always expected this moment to come. The silence stretched between them until Miguel set down his empty Coke can with deliberate precision. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight Ray had never heard before. 17 years ago, my nephew Carlos was killed in a drive-by shooting in East LA. Gang violence, cops said. Case went cold after 6 months. Miguel's eyes never left Ray's face. But I always wondered why a kid who'd never touched drugs or gangs would be targeted like that. Why the witnesses all disappeared or changed their stories. Ray felt something cold settle in his stomach, but Chen was already pulling out another photograph, one that made the air leave his lungs in a rush. Carlos Santos, 18 years old, community college student, part-time job at a camera rental house. Shot 3 times outside his apartment building in February 2006. Your nephew was collateral damage in a Petrov operation, Chen said quietly. Wrong place, wrong time. He witnessed a weapons handoff between 2 of Petrov's people and a local crew. Had to be silenced. Miguel's hands began shaking again, but not from low blood sugar this time. You knew? He asked Ray. All these years you knew what happened to Carlos? No. Ray's voice came out hoarse. Miguel, I swear to God, I had no idea. But you could have found out. Miguel stood up slowly, each movement deliberate and controlled. 15 years I've been bringing you lunch, covering your shifts when you were sick, listening to you complain about broken toilets and overtime schedules. And the whole time, you had the skills to find out who killed my nephew. The accusation hit harder than any of Chen's threats. Ray watched 15 years of friendship crumble in real time, destroyed not by what he'd done, but by what he'd chosen not to do. How many other victims had Petrov claimed while Ray perfected his invisibility? This is exactly why Petrov has to be stopped, Chen said, though her satisfaction was poorly concealed. How many more Carlos Santos deaths while Warsaw plays janitor? Ray's mind reeled through the implications, but something felt wrong. The timing was too convenient, the revelation too perfectly calibrated to destroy his relationship with Miguel and eliminate his last anchor to civilian life. Show me the rest, he said. Chen hesitated for just a fraction of a second, barely perceptible, but Ray had spent 3 decades reading micro-expressions for survival. She was holding something back. The rest of what? Carlos Santos wasn't random collateral damage. You said witnesses disappeared or changed stories. That's not gang cleanup, that's professional intelligence work. Why would the CIA know about a small-time weapons handoff in East LA unless... The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. Ray grabbed the photograph from Chen's hand and studied it more carefully. Carlos Santos wasn't just in the wrong place. He was carrying a camera bag. Professional equipment, the kind used for surveillance work. He was yours, Ray said. Carlos was a CIA asset. You were using him to monitor Petrov's weapons shipments through the camera rental house. Chen's poker face slipped completely. That's not... You got a kid killed because you needed eyes on Petrov's operation and couldn't risk using experienced agents. Then you've been sitting on that information for 17 years, waiting for the right moment to weaponize Miguel's grief against me. Miguel looked between them, his face cycling through confusion and dawning horror. My nephew was working for the CIA? Probably didn't even know it, Ray continued, his voice growing colder. They would have approached him as a patriotic citizen helping with national security. Small favors, easy money, completely safe. Until Petrov's people made him and decided to clean house. Chen's hand moved toward her jacket, but Ray was already moving. 15 years of rust couldn't completely dull muscle memory. His utility knife appeared in his grip as he closed the distance between them. The blade stopped 6 inches from her throat, close enough that she could feel the intent behind it. Here's what's going to happen, Ray said quietly. You're going to tell Miguel and me exactly what's really going on. No more lies, no more manipulation, no more dead kids used as emotional leverage. You don't understand the scope of what Petrov's built, Chen said, but her voice had lost its commanding edge. The screening tomorrow night isn't just graduation day for his sleeper agents. It's the launch of something called Operation Spotlight. 3 coordinated terrorist attacks during major film premieres, designed to look like random violence, but actually targeting specific political figures. Who's the real target? Chen's eyes flicked toward Miguel, then back to Ray. Senator Patricia Morrison, chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee. She's been investigating CIA connections to Hollywood for 6 months, getting close to exposing something that could bring down half the agency's leadership. Ray felt the knife steady in his grip as understanding crystallized. Someone in the CIA is working with Petrov, someone high enough up to have access to operational details about Prague, and Morrison's investigation threatens to expose them. Which means, Chen said with something almost like relief, you're not hunting Petrov tomorrow night, Warsaw. You're hunting the mole who's been selling American intelligence for 30 years. The abandoned lobby seemed to contract around them, as Ray realized he'd been recruited for an assassination disguised as justice. Ray lowered the knife but didn't put it away. The weight of 30 years' worth of betrayals, his own and others, settled over the abandoned lobby like dust from demolished dreams. The mole, he said quietly. Someone who knew Prague inside and out, someone who's been feeding Petrov intelligence long enough to build his entire Hollywood operation. His eyes met Chen's. Someone you've suspected all along but could never prove. Deputy Director Harrison Blackwood, Chen confirmed. 40-year veteran, access to everything. And tomorrow night he'll be at that screening, sitting 3 seats away from Senator Morrison when Petrov's people make their move. Miguel sank back into his chair, the revelation about his nephew Carlos still bleeding through his expression like an open wound. So you're going to let terrorists murder a senator to catch your mole? We're going to prevent the assassination and expose Blackwood in the process, Chen said. But it requires someone Petrov trusts to be dead, someone whose sudden resurrection would force him into desperate action. Ray understood the trap completely now. You need Warsaw to walk into that screening alive. Petrov sees a ghost from Prague and panics, makes mistakes, reveals the full scope of his operation, and Blackwood's involvement in front of witnesses who matter. The alternative is letting Morrison die and watching Blackwood bury his tracks so deep we'll never find them. Chen's voice carried the weight of calculated sacrifice. How many more Carlos Santos deaths while we play politics? The manipulation was surgical in its precision, using Miguel's grief, Ray's guilt, and the senator's life as interlocking pressure points. But beneath the cynicism, Ray recognized something else, the desperate logic of an intelligence operative backed into an impossible corner. Miguel looked up from his chair, his eyes red with tears he refused to shed. Ray, all these years, did you really not know about Carlos? The question hung between them like a loaded gun. Ray could lie, preserve whatever fragments of their friendship might survive this revelation. Or he could offer Miguel the truth and destroy the last good relationship in his carefully constructed civilian life. I knew something was wrong, Ray admitted. Your nephew's death never made sense tactically. Too clean for gang violence, too personal for random crime. But I didn't dig deeper because, he paused, searching for words that might explain 15 years of willful blindness. Because I was afraid of what I'd find. Afraid it would lead me back to this world. Coward, Miguel said, but without heat. More like someone naming a medical condition. Ray nodded. Yeah, I was. Chen watched their exchange with professional detachment, but Ray caught her glancing toward the exit. Time pressure. Whatever was happening tomorrow night, the timeline was accelerating beyond her control. There's something else, she said. Chuck Norris isn't just hosting tomorrow's screening. He's been tracking Petrov's operation for 3 years, ever since one of his regular stunt coordinators turned up dead in what looked like a climbing accident. Ray felt the pieces shifting again, forming new patterns. Norris knows about the sleeper agents? Suspects. But he's been conducting his own investigation through Hollywood's action community, asking questions, following money trails, building a database of suspicious deaths and disappearances. Chen smiled grimly. Turns out legendary action stars have access to information networks that would make the CIA jealous. So tomorrow night we'll have Petrov, Blackwood, Norris, and a room full of sleeper agents all in the same place. Ray calculated the tactical nightmare. Plus Senator Morrison and however many civilians. 43 industry professionals confirmed attendance, Chen confirmed, including studio executives, directors, and actors who have no idea they're walking into a war zone. Miguel stood up slowly, his movements careful and deliberate. For a moment, Ray thought his friend was about to walk away, Abandon this madness and return to the simple world of maintenance schedules and overtime pay. Instead, Miguel looked directly at Chen. Carlos was studying film production at community college. Said he wanted to work in movies someday, maybe as a cameraman or director. That's how you recruited him, wasn't it? Offered him a chance to get close to the industry he loved. Chen didn't answer, but her silence was confirmation enough. You people, Miguel continued, his voice gaining strength, you turn everything good into a weapon. Carlos's dreams, Ray's guilt, my grief, all just tools for your games. Ray watched his friend process 17 years of unanswered questions. Seeing the exact moment Miguel Santos decided to stop being a victim of other people's wars. But that kid deserved better than dying for CIA politics, Miguel said. And if there's a chance to stop it from happening to someone else's nephew. He looked at Ray. I'm in. The words hit Ray like a physical blow. In 15 years of friendship, Miguel had never asked for anything more dangerous than covering a shift or lending jumper cables. Now he was volunteering for a mission that would likely kill them all. Miguel, no. This isn't your fight. Carlos was my family, Miguel replied simply. That makes it my fight. In the distance, security radios continued their mundane chatter about shift changes and parking violations. But in Building C's abandoned lobby, 3 people stood on the threshold of a war that had been building for 30 years. Ray realized his 15-year exile was finally over. Ray stood motionless for a long moment, feeling the weight of decades pressing down on him. Miguel's simple declaration, that makes it my fight, had shattered the last protective wall between his hidden past and uncertain future. There was no more hiding behind mop handles and anonymity. If we do this, Ray said quietly, there's no going back for any of us. Miguel, you understand what you're volunteering for? These aren't movie villains. They're killers who've spent 30 years perfecting their craft. Miguel's jaw tightened. Carlos was 18, Ray. 18 years old, with his whole life ahead of him. If I can stop someone else's kid from ending up dead in an alley? He shrugged with forced casualness. Then maybe his death meant something. Chen stepped forward, sensing the shift in momentum. We have 16 hours before the screening, enough time to… No. Ray's voice cut through her planning like a blade. We do this my way, or we don't do it at all. I've spent 15 years watching you people turn everything into collateral damage. Miguel gets kept safe, away from the operational zone. Ray, I just told you. I heard what you said. But Carlos died because someone decided an untrained civilian could handle professional intelligence work. I won't make that mistake twice. Ray turned to face Chen directly, and for the first time since Prague, he let the killer show in his eyes. You want Warsaw back? Then you get all of him, including the part that doesn't take orders from handlers who sacrifice kids for political convenience. Chen's hand instinctively moved toward her jacket, then stopped as she recognized something in Ray's posture, a subtle shift from janitor to predator. After 30 years, muscle memory was reasserting itself with frightening ease. What do you propose? She asked carefully. Simple. You get me into that screening as legitimate maintenance staff. I identify Blackwood, confirm Petrov's operation, and extract evidence of their connection. Then I disappear again. And if Petrov recognizes you? Ray's smile held no warmth. Then we have a conversation that's 30 years overdue. Miguel watched this exchange with growing recognition, finally seeing the man Ray had hidden beneath 15 years of careful mediocrity. Jesus, Ray, you really were one of them, weren't you? Yeah, I really was. The admission hung between them, reshaping 15 years of shared lunches and overtime shifts. Ray could see Miguel processing the implications. Every casual conversation about workplace safety, every instinctive assessment of building security, every moment when Ray's reactions seemed slightly too controlled for a simple janitor. Were we ever really friends? Miguel asked. Or was I just… cover? The question cut deeper than any of Chen's threats. Ray realized that in trying to protect Miguel from his past, he'd never allowed their friendship to be entirely real. How do you explain genuine affection built on necessary lies? Both, Ray said finally. It started as cover. But Miguel, you've been the best part of my life for 15 years. That was never fake. Miguel nodded slowly, some tension leaving his shoulders. "Okay, then let's go get these bastards." Chen pulled out a tablet, calling up building schematics. The screening's in the Golden Gate Theater on Lot 7. Supposedly a private event celebrating Chuck Norris's career, but Blackwood's attendance confirms it's operational. Ray studied the layouts, his mind automatically calculating sightlines, exit routes, and tactical positions. The theater was a restored 1940s venue, intimate enough that any violence would affect everyone present, perfect for Petrov's purposes. Maximum chaos, minimum escape options. "Security setup?" he asked. "Standard studio protocol plus enhanced screening for VIP attendees. But maintenance staff won't get the same scrutiny, especially if they're already in the system." "Which brings us to the real problem," Ray said. "Getting me close enough to Blackwood and Petrov without triggering the sleeper agents. 17 trained killers who've spent years preparing for exactly this scenario." Miguel cleared his throat. "What if you didn't go in alone?" "Absolutely not. Hear me out. I've been working this studio for 12 years. I know every maintenance protocol, every security guard, every executive assistant. People trust me because I'm invisible. Just another aging janitor who fixes things quietly." Ray saw where this was heading. "Miguel, you need someone on the inside who can watch your back. Someone Petrov's people wouldn't suspect because they're too busy looking for CIA operatives." Miguel's voice gained conviction. "They'll be watching for Warsaw, the legendary killer. Not Santos, the night janitor who brings everyone coffee." Chen was already nodding. "Two-man maintenance team responding to a routine projection booth check. Gives you legitimate access to the theater's technical areas." Ray felt the familiar weight of command decisions, balancing mission requirements against human cost. But this wasn't Prague, where abstract political objectives had blinded him to personal consequences. This was about Miguel's nephew, Ray's exile, and the possibility that some mistakes could finally be corrected. "All right," he said, "but we do this smart, professional, and Miguel follows my lead absolutely." "Understood." Ray looked at his friend, really looked, seeing past 15 years of careful routine to the man underneath. Miguel Santos, who'd lost a nephew to political games and chosen to fight back rather than accept defeat. Maybe redemption was possible after all. Miguel slid into the opposite seat, looking older but somehow lighter than he had that night in Building C. The lines around his eyes spoke of grief finally processed rather than buried. He ordered black coffee and apple pie, the same combination he'd chosen every Tuesday since Carlos died 17 years ago. "Still having the dreams?" Miguel asked. "Different ones now." Ray managed half a smile. Blackwood in handcuffs instead of Prague in flames. Progress, I suppose. The takedown had been surgical, exactly the kind of operation Ray once excelled at before politics and pride had led him astray. Petrov never saw it coming. 17 sleeper agents neutralized without a single civilian casualty. Deputy Director Blackwood's 30-year betrayal exposed in excruciating detail before Senator Morrison's investigators. But the cost had been predictable. Ray's cover was permanently blown, his anonymous life scattered like dust from demolished sets. Chen had offered reinstatement, a chance to return to the agency with full honors. He'd declined with the same quiet finality he'd once used to tender his original resignation. "Sarah called yesterday," Ray said, testing the words carefully. His daughter's voice still carried traces of suspicion after 15 years of enforced distance, but underneath lay something he'd almost forgotten, curiosity about her father's real identity. How's she handling it? "Better than I expected. Turns out she always suspected something was off about dear old Dad's career change." Ray pulled out his phone, showing Miguel a photo of a 7-year-old girl with his eyes and her grandmother's stubborn chin. "Emma wants to meet her grandfather." The weight of that simple statement, grandfather, settled between them like a bridge finally built across impossible distance. Ray had spent 15 years protecting his family by staying away. Now protection meant something different, being present, being honest, being the man his granddaughter could respect, rather than the ghost his daughter had learned to forget. "Chuck stopped by the studio yesterday," Miguel said. "Asked about you." Ray wasn't surprised. Chuck Norris had proven himself exactly what the legends suggested, a man who understood honor in its purest form, Their brief conversation after Petrov's capture had been wordless, just a nod between professionals who'd served something larger than themselves. He offered me work, Ray continued. Security consulting for action films. Apparently there's a market for someone who knows the difference between movie violence and the real thing. You interested? Ray considered the question honestly. After 3 decades of real bullets and political betrayals, the idea of choreographed combat held unexpected appeal. Controlled danger, scheduled conflicts with predetermined outcomes, violence as art rather than necessity, maybe. It's honest work, and I'm tired of hiding what I'm good at. Miguel nodded, understanding the deeper implications. They'd both spent years pretending to be less than they were. Miguel's engineering background buried under janitorial uniforms, Ray's operational expertise hidden behind maintenance schedules. The mission had stripped away those protective layers, revealing the men underneath. Carlos would have loved all this, Miguel said quietly. The Hollywood intrigue, the spy games, even Chuck Norris playing the hero for real. His voice carried sadness, but no longer the raw anguish that had defined their friendship. Kid always said movies were just stories about people finding their courage. Ray felt something shift in his chest, not healing exactly, but a recognition that some wounds could coexist with hope. Carlos Santos had died because adults played dangerous games with young lives, but his uncle had found the strength to fight back, and that mattered. It had to matter. Chen's being reassigned, Ray said. Internal investigation found irregularities in her recruitment methods going back years. Turns out using civilian assets without proper oversight is still frowned upon, even when it works. Good. People like her forget that we're human beings, not chess pieces. The Denny's slowly filled with the usual post-midnight crowd. Security guards ending shifts, medical residents grabbing coffee between emergencies, insomniacs seeking fluorescent-lit sanctuary. Ray watched them with the automatic awareness that would never entirely leave him, but without the constant vigilance that had defined his exile years. At 3:15 a.m., they paid their check and walked into the Los Angeles dawn. Miguel headed toward his car, a new Toyota he'd bought with the consulting fee Chen's replacement had quietly arranged. Ray walked in the opposite direction, toward a small apartment in Silver Lake where his daughter planned to visit next weekend. Behind them, Paramount Studios stretched across 45 acres of manufactured dreams, where janitors still mopped floors and maintenance crews still fixed what was broken. But now Ray understood something he'd forgotten during 15 years of hiding. Sometimes the most important repairs happen inside yourself, one honest conversation at a time. The morning air smelled of possibility.